Thanks for coming, everyone. My name is Morsi. I am here today to talk to you about the Syracuse Innovators Guild, which was Syracuse, New York's first hackerspace. You know, hackerspaces, makerspaces, I'm assuming most, if everyone here is familiar with them, if anyone's not familiar, it's essentially just a kind of a community-operated space where people come together, work on projects, you know, socialize, have fun. You know, the idea is to reach out to the communities, to express interest in tech topics and all sorts of things. So I'm here today to talk about the history of our group, where we came, where we went, and so on and so forth. So the Syracuse Innovators Guild started in 2010. It was just really a bunch of people in the local community. Our founder posted a Craigslist of all places. I don't know why he chose Craigslist, to tell you the honest truth. I had found out about it. I saw the post when I was looking for a new apartment, so it was just a really random thing for me. You know, I emailed the guy. We all started meeting up at coffee shops, restaurants, bars, just trying to drive some momentum. It was just a really rough concept in the early days. But you know, we had formed enough interest to. We felt that it was right to incorporate. You know, one of the early things that I've quickly found out about, and that I wanted to kind of convey in a group like this, is that, you know, there's a balance that's needed in whatever endeavor that you do. I don't know. I mean, everyone here has heard about Makerspace, but is anyone here, I guess, involved in organizing a group like this? Or, yeah, there's a couple former organizers of the guild here. But anyone that runs, let's say, a small group at your local university, or, okay, that's fine. Well, you know, the challenge behind a group, something like this, is that when you're trying to drive interest in any particular topic, is you want to not take on too much burden, but you also want to show commitment. So, you know, during the early days, we decided to form a group that we did have, I guess, I don't want to say burdens, but we did have expenses, we did have things that we had to pay for, as far as an operating space, machines, tools, people's time, but you know, we also wanted to keep those minimal, and thus we kind of failed in that effort. Long story short, the group did get as far as formally incorporating, adopting a home, but as you can see here, the group only exists now as kind of this virtual entity. And a couple years ago, we had to shut our doors down because we kind of jumped too quick, too soon. We took way too many financial responsibilities on early on, and due to various mistakes that we made, the group wasn't able to pay its bills. So I'm going to talk about a couple of those, but as it stands today, the group exists as a 501c3, a fully a nonprofit at the federal level, but we don't have an actual physical space to show. So how did we get there? Well, as I mentioned, the group was founded in 2010. Our founder posted a Craigslist. I personally saw it. A few of our other members sitting up here saw it via Meetup. Meetup was one of the best resources that our group could use. It essentially allows us to get the word out very easily, very quickly. It provided us a lot of tools that we were able to quickly leverage to show what was happening and where. So I personally thought Meetup was a great tool. If you have a group like this, I really encourage you to adopt Meetup because it's cheap and it allows you to get the word out. So here I collected some aggregate statistics for our group. This is over the whole lifetime of it. on the left, you can see the meetups by calendar month, and on the upper left, and on the lower left, you see the number of attendees by specific calendar month, and on the right, you see the aggregate meetups. Now, unfortunately, this is the complete picture. I took every single meetup, I ran the numbers, and this is what the group did. Now, I have to say that some things that the group did weren't done through Meetup, and for example, some people that signed up via Meetup didn't show up, and vice versa. So this maybe encapsulates 90% of it. There's things that happen with this group outside of it.
We also had other meetups. We did have the Bitcoin and there was other.
That's
Ethereum as well.
That's true. So there was a lot of different groups in the Syracuse community that was using our space for various purposes. I was hoping that these graphs would show us a little bit more as to why the group succeeded or didn't, but it really, there isn't a lot of information in these graphs, besides the fact that the group was fairly active during the entire course of its lifetime, right? You can see that there's only a few gaps in the number of meetups, but per month. But even that being said, the space was being used during that time. So, just because there was an informal meetup doesn't mean that people weren't in the space and, working on projects, socializing and whatnot. Also on the left, or on the right, excuse me, there really wasn't a particular time of year that was more conducive to hacking. Maybe you can see here in June and October, there was more attendance, but, I don't want to really draw any conclusions. So again, this just goes to show that the group was active during the 5 years that it was operational, and it was doing things. Now here is where the story gets a little bit more interesting. We see the average attendees by type and topic. On the left, we see a very nice, promising a picture that looks really good in the sense that workshops, presentations, social events, these accounted for more than half of the things that the group did. So people that came in to visit the guild, they saw that we were doing stuff of value. We were working on projects, we were having cool presentations, we were having discussions on all sorts of topics, which is great. This is what people come to these sorts of groups for. On the flip side, a really bad part was the fact that the organization was such a large slice. When you come to a group like this, you don't want to see people just doing kind of the bureaucracy, just talking about how do we make money, how do we, so on and so forth. This stuff is necessary, you can't just completely discount it, but, you really require a balance. And I think that's one of the key words that I want to drive in all this. You need a kind of a balance in your efforts, in everything in life, but especially with your efforts like a group like this. You have to provide value, you have to do, technical things, presentations and workshops, but you also have to make money, as much as we, wish we could ignore it, you have to pay the bills to keep a space open at the end of the day. So, the right balance, in my opinion, would have less on the org side, but you do have to have some commitment to those type of activities. And plus, a thing that people can do that work really well is be open. Don't try to foster this, you have to be part of this exclusive club to run the group, you're just an attendee. The more that you can reach out to people and say, hey, we need help doing stuff, the more you bring in, the more that you recognize people's endeavors in an open, very clear manner, the more conducive it will be to people joining your group. So, don't be afraid to discuss what you need and to ask for help. On the right side, we see a nice picture. We see that the group had a very wide, diverse set of interests. There really wasn't any particular topic that was more interesting to others in the Syracuse community. Things maybe like cryptography and programming, maybe slightly more so than others, but everything, the group never shunned anyone. We opened our doors. I never encountered any time which someone came to the group, said, hey, I was interested in this, and the group said no. So I think that was something that the group did really well. So here's a picture from our first home. There's a few people in this room that you might recognize. We had started meeting in 2010. We incorporated in 2011. We committed our first space in 2012, early 2012. Now, this space was both a curse and a blessing, in my opinion. I guess the curse part was what I talked about before, was that the bills were way too high. We didn't, in my opinion, we didn't do our homework before we moved into our space. We found a space downtown, which I think was the very first place recommended to us. I, myself included, I didn't, do any hunting as far as properties. We just kind of jumped. It showed commitment, but we should have jumped into something a smaller boat, something that we could have manned. It was what it was. The place has had a special place in my heart because it was our first place. We can see our main area where we worked on projects. So we had a kitchen. We had on the lower right a bit of we see our first internet setup, which is another keynote. Always have internet. You can't survive without it. Is there a question? Or, you just all right, stretching.
So real quick, I want to just add something on the slide. So that access point there was actually operating as a wireless bridge from the building next door. So we weren't actually, at that point, we didn't even have our own internet access. We were piggybacking off of somebody else. But yep. they gave us permission, of course.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah, there was quite a few hacks with this place. I mean, the garage, the parking spot hack I'm not going to discuss because we may not have permission for that. But yeah, so that was our first space. Downtown, as I said, parking was a big hassle with that. But, one thing that the group did do right during its lifetime was we had a lot of really great presentations and workshops. I think this was kind of the golden star that our group did. The star at the top of our tree, excuse me. On the upper left and the bottom right, you see the Hackers on a Train tour. Mitch Altman came visit all the hackerspaces, not all, a lot of hackerspaces in the country, including Interlock and ours. Here we see a little trip we took to Interlock early on. Interlock's a Rochester hackerspace. Yeah. Yes. One of our organizational meetings early on, Arduino Day, social events, lightning talks. This group, as you saw in the slide a couple slides ago, it was doing stuff all the time. So, I think this was one of the things that we did best as far as, offering value to the community. And, we were promoting ourselves well, and great effort from everyone who was ever, involved with the group as far as that front goes. We also worked on projects, robots to 3D printers to a Bitcoin barbershop pole that would light up whenever Bitcoin would go up and down. The group did things. It may be not as many as much emphasis on the projects part as on the presentations, but still things were being done. Though, there were a lot of projects that weren't finished. You can see again a robot that wasn't finished, a MakerBot. This was more of a problem during the early days. When we first started when we first got going, people wanted to see what were you doing. So it was kind of like crickets, and that's really tough. It's a tough sell. Later on, once we had some stuff under our belt, we were able to, that wasn't as big of an issue. It was like, oh, hey, check out this cool thing, or that right there was a giant, keyboard that we were building, so you could play Rock Band with it. It never got finished. I guess that's another point. If you're running a group like this, if you're involved with a group like this, you might not necessarily have to finish your projects, but I encourage you to get things to a point which you can demonstrate, right? It's embarrassing if you don't have something to show, and even if you have something like it's kind of halfway there, but we could use more help. At least that gives people something to grasp onto. But if you can't finish it, repurpose it. Here you can see the keyboard turned into a coffee table. A lot of stuff came through this group. that at first I was like, oh my god, we have so much junk, but I actually kind of liked it over time. It kind of added an aesthetic to the space, and the policy was, if you brought it into the space, label it if you wanted to keep it. If not, it belongs to the group. People can use it eventually. So what?
Goes in the bone yard.
Exactly. Then we had a discard pile that would eventually get sold. So I think if you have a process dealing with stuff like this, it's not as big of an issue. So at the end of the day, why didn't we succeed, quote unquote? Well, money. We took on expenses that were not able to that we weren't able to cover with our income. Here you can see this was a chart that was made fairly later on by one of our members. You can see that at this point we were talking about increasing our dues, and they weren't even then it wasn't going to be enough to cover the costs in the long run. So that's kind of the story in one picture, right? But that chart was after a couple moves. The first place we had was very expensive, so we did find a second place. It was the month we were supposed to leave, but this place, in my opinion, was our best. This is my humble opinion. We had a green screen room, we had a workshop, we had a server room. The group was really happening in this period, during this period. Watch out for landlords. I've had every single landlord try to pull shady stuff. Our first treasurer is smiling over here. So, from people having super huge, complicated lease agreements to slipping things into lease agreements, hoping that people won't catch, to holding security deposits. I actually sued our first landlord because he wouldn't give us our security deposit back, which he quickly did after he got the letter from the court. Which, in that same vein, I guess my advice on that would be to quote Teddy Roosevelt, in the sense that speak softly but carry a big stick. Be kind to your landlord, be polite, but don't be afraid to, if he ever tries, or if he or she ever tries something, stand your ground. If they try to pull some shady stuff, be like, no, this is not what we agreed to. Obviously in a polite way. In almost every city across America, across the world, there's tons of vacant properties, still dealing with the effect of the housing bubble and all that good stuff. So use that to your advantage, Don't be afraid to negotiate rent. Don't be afraid to say, hey, I'm involved with this local community group, that we're offering a lot of value to our community. Don't you want a group like ours to be in your space? If you notice the space is sitting empty for a few years, use that as a negotiating point. So unfortunately, our landlord of the second space kind of pulled a bait and switch. The month I think our lease was due, he said, I rented, it was due to renew, I rented your space out to someone else, But incidentally, we have this other space, he had this other space that was kind of going unused for a long time, and why don't you guys just move in here? It works, It
was more money.
It was more money.
It was more space.
Didn't have heat.
Yeah, it didn't have heat. Half the year we couldn't use it. It's, when it was being used, it was rocking. There was a lot of fun events and whatnot. But I personally, a little bit.
But we kind of took a step back because we moved from an area that was too expensive into a decent space for us, and then ended up back in the same boat where we were once again paying really more than what we could afford.
What we could afford, yeah.
And it had a lot of potential, and we didn't have to, like, there was good and bad to it. So we had no electric. We didn't have to pay for electric, right? It was included, so we could run space heaters, right? It was still cold in the wintertime, but but all of our IT stuff that was running, we even joked about setting up Bitcoin mining in there because we weren't paying for electricity, which we didn't do. But there was, it definitely, but it definitely, what happened was that we, as a group, and this was the last, I came in the second space, is when I joined the group. So collectively as a group, what we didn't learn was from that first space to the second space, how much of a burden had been lifted off of us rent-wise.
Yeah.
Well, these Bitcoin mining would have helped with the heating problem.
Yeah, I know, right?
And maybe paid the
It
bills.
could have paid the bills too. Yeah.
Three birds with one stone. Yeah, that's a good point. I think that coordinating efforts, is very important with a group like this. It's a lot of people put a lot of hard work into this. I think that was one of the biggest tragedies. That's I kind of was reflecting upon that. It's like, how did the group get to this point after putting so much time and dedication and manpower? But part of it was not coordination. Part of it was, again, just some mistakes with finances and so on and so forth.
And Mo, if I could add, also I think that there was a big difference in vision. So some people felt that really the wood shop was like the best thing, right? And the fact that this space had lots of room, and we had a really large wood shop, table saw, the whole thing. That was the best, that was the best piece of it. We had an electronics workstation, and everything had its place, whereas the previous building, everything was kind of tight. And then other folks felt that, the space really should have been better heated and needed to look more professional. So what we had was people's visions were kind of playing out in this collage, rather than having a vision that everyone was behind to support. We ended up with lots of visions, and I think that fractured the group in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I also disagree, and I would love to hear
Sure.
people's thoughts. Yeah, right. I mean, you want diversity and synergy, and I think this goes back to what I said about balance before. It's you want to be able to reach out to a lot of different people, but at the same time, yes, you can't do everything all the time, so you have to kind of focus efforts. It's tough. I'm sure people that are maybe not involved, maybe you're not even involved in organizing a group, but if you're just a participant or an observer, then you might see some of these things that you have meetings which everyone's talking, but nothing seems to be getting done, or you have someone that's doing a good job on something, but it's not being recognized. Every little one of these things that you can address and that you can try to solve a little bit, even if you don't solve the big picture, goes a long way to help these sorts of groups, especially in its incantation in its early days. Well, here we see kind of a more stark picture. Kind of the ultimate reason why the group had to shut its doors. Things like rent, utilities, internet, they add up, and it's not cheap. So every penny you can save, the better. Don't be stingy. There's again that balance that you need to be made. Look for innovative ways to repurpose the tools and resources you have. We took a lot of the old computers that were donated. Mix and match parts, build a computer lab. But don't be afraid to spend money on things to show that buy 3D printers, buy stuff you need for workshops and whatnot. So inevitable. In 2015, 2 years ago, we shut the doors of our last space, which you just saw. The group had a fire sale. We decided, the interest wasn't there to continue operations, at least for the time being. But, who knows? Maybe the group can spring to life again. It's in cold storage. All the stuff is in people's houses. The community is still there. I was talking to Mark outside. The circumstances would have to be right. It would take a lot. I'm not denying it, but it could happen. So that's where it stands. The Syracuse Hackerspac does exist on paper, but don't get in over your heads. I think that's one of the biggest things. And question. What first one here? Yeah.
Sure. So what would, taking this postmortem, especially you guys' insider knowledge, what are your suggestions for, especially the budgetary ideas for organizations like this? Do you think they should start utilizing cheap public spaces like libraries and build some sort of like endowment, and then move into spaces, or like what do you think is a good strategy?
Yeah, I'd love to hear other people's thoughts, but the more you can piggyback on other people, great. If you have someone that can offer a space for free, you're immediately cutting a huge expense out of your what you need to pay. Be careful with the endowments and the grants and stuff like that. You know, we, as I mentioned before, we went the nonprofit route, and various people will attest to whether that's good or bad. I'm looking at First Treasurer because Chris here, he raised some good
Yeah, so
counterpoints.
We ran into some issues with where to get money from as a nonprofit.
Yeah.
But also, one of the other issues, financial, was there was this mentality of if we build it, they will come. So there was this over-optimistic sort of view of, okay, well, once we get our space, then more members will join, and they'll all give us, $100 a month or whatever. Now, in certain cities that might be doable, but in Syracuse, with its strange sort of
dynamic,
economic issues, may not have been realistic.
Yeah, I think a key thing is don't overcommit yourself up front. I mean, we started off with, less income than expenses, so it was from day one, we're like, okay, who's gonna throw in extra money this month, and the next month, and the next month, and so make sure you're not overextending yourselves like that. Make sure you're budgeting wisely, and if you can, try to save money.
And I would say too that you have to ask yourself why. Why do we need the space? Do we really have a reason? Is there any reason that we can't meet at the library? So if you're grassrootsing, if you've got a grassroots movement and you're trying to build something, then I think using a local library that has a space, like for example, we have Fayetteville that has 3D printers more than we ever had.
But that didn't exist when we started.
It didn't. But today, if we were going to do it again, I would be in favor of using that space for as long as we could until we absolutely grew out of it and needed something else. Not just ego, not like, oh, we have our own space, but needed.
There were a couple other questions. Yeah. Go ahead.
So, multiple roles of directors that interlock, right? One of the questions that I was you guys talked about quickly, raising member dues. Like, we haven't raised our member dues since we've opened. We've been static, right? And it causes budgetary constraints.
Yep.
Not that we're massively facing them, but one of the things that I always argue is we should have some uproll over time. What was your guys' you talked about that in one of your slides real quick. What was, I don't know how much you charge for your member dues, so I don't know what the limit was to begin with. So what was the negative feedback? Why is it that
to increasing the dues?
Yeah, you increase the dues.
Yeah, I think the general philosophy is if you increase dues, you have to increase value, right? I mean,
Right.
people who are paying the current dues, they're paying because they get that they feel like the value they got out of the space, that's offset by that. But if they're being asked to pay more dues, well, why should I?
Well, I think we're looking towards it.
And we were also looking. We were very optimistic in that we were going to be able to pull in new members.
Right.
So there was definitely a disagreement, pretty violent disagreement at times,
Okay.
over whether or if we raise the dues, is that going to make it harder for us to attract new members? So we and it wasn't that it was very expensive, but we just we're trying to understand why we would get good turnouts at our meetups, but we wouldn't have necessarily a really good conversion rate.
Sure.
Right?
It wasn't super expensive, but it was
Yeah.
I mean, we did try other options besides raising dues. We also tried to lower dues at one point to hopefully encourage more people to join. It did a little, but it didn't have the net effect in the end of what we needed.
Sure.
You probably have time for this
Yeah,
question.
yeah, we have like a minute left.
So I live in the Syracuse area.
Okay.
And I think I saw one news story on you guys at when you first opened. And that was all I ever heard about your makerspace.
Sure.
And so what kind of things are you guys doing? What are you doing to get people to
Come in.
that maybe haven't heard of you before?
Like I said, our main outreach thing was Meetup. We hit all the social networks, Facebook, Twitter, so on and so forth. We did reach out to the newspapers. I mean, that was something,
Not frequently. I think we could have used more press releases, potentially.
Uh,
From my opinion, I think I was pushing for that at one point, but it never really happened. But I think it could have
You
pushed a
say
little
not
more interest.
I want to dispute not frequently though, because early on, at least I know I was constantly every event reaching out to sending things to the papers. So yeah, just also virally, so. I felt like that was a front that yeah, maybe there was things that we could have improved, but there's a lot of things that we did everything that we could have. You know, like presentations and outreach. I think at the end of the day, money was the big thing, and not, like Mark said, not jumping into that huge financial commitment. The group probably would still be around. So balance people. You know, that's what it takes. All right, thanks for coming, everyone.